Good morning slash afternoon slash evening slash nighttime, wherever you are in the world. This is on the internet, so time is irrelevant. Welcome. Welcome to Recruiting EQ episode number 63. Already somehow lucky 63. The month end sales panel. So far, our most popular wacky thing that we do every month. And this month, I'm very happy to say that we've got a Texas focused edition. My lovely guests are both in Texas, and we will have lots of questions for them, as most of the listeners of this podcast are not in Texas. This is kind of a new focus. So we can you can both help me educate some of us Canadians or UK people or New Yorkers, New Jerseyites on what's going on in Texas right now. Thanks both for being here. If you can maybe introduce yourselves and tell the listeners a little bit about who you are and what you do.
I guess I'll go first if we're in that order. I'm Christina Loesch, or Christina Jones Loesch. I represent LVI Associates at Beta International. We cover and specialize at LVI in civil engineering and infrastructure, making placements there for clients really internationally. But I just focus on California in the transportation sector specifically, since that obviously is a huge umbrella term and could cover a lot of different things. But I've been doing that for the past about 4 years now. So that's who I am.
Thanks, Christina. Jessica?
Hi, everybody. I'm Jessica Allen. I'm here in Austin, Texas, which is basically the new Silicon Valley-ish. All the Californians move here. That is the jam. I own my own business, 90 Days to Slay. Come back from recruiting, people management. But right now my focus is really helping small businesses and brands realize how to communicate their personal value better. And that trickles down to everyone. I was actually on the phone with my sister yesterday who's looking for a new job. And I was like, hey, here's how you have to brand yourself to stand out. These are some marketing ploys that I would suggest that you do when you're trying to reach out to a recruiter, because being seen is everything. And that's what I help people do. So just be seen for who you are and be cool and weird or whatever. But I'm glad to be here.
Thank you very much, Jessica. I feel like we're already. So, Christina, you're in the sort of greater Dallas area. Jessica, you're in the Austin. You're in Austin, and I love that you're already hitting the be weird.
I mean, I feel like I've been more of an Austinite than most. I've been here since I was 7, so I feel like legitimately, I definitely am more Austinite. But I think in my old age, at 41 tomorrow, I would say,
birthday.
Thank you. Just being yourself is so much more interesting than being anything else. And if that's a little weird, then, I'll take it. I'll take it with the delightful. 100%.
How many of those t-shirts do you have?
I don't have any, actually. I don't. I'm my 8-year-old, he's a little bit like ADHD and on the spectrum. I'm like, babe, you are weird and it is your superpower, bro. Because one day people are going to be amazed at the way that your brain calculates information.
That's true.
It's going to blow their mind. Right now, other 8-year-olds, they're just not into it. They don't see the vision. That's fine. You'll have your time later. I promise you.
It's a good message in general. Well, so I thank you both for being here. Certainly, I would love to dig down a little bit more into how both of you are interacting with, this being the sales panel, outreaches, how that fits in. To what extent do you feel like the challenges and so on that you're facing have to do with the Texas market and whatnot? I'd also like to pepper in some fun facts about Texas. This is a new thing that I'm doing just because I love trivia. And just to be clear, we're not playing trivia. There's no winners and losers. We're all on the winning team. So this isn't a competition at all. But I will be throwing out some weird facts that maybe we can all guess at. This is going out live on Facebook, on LinkedIn, on YouTube, and on X. So if you are listening live, please do feel free to comment or ask questions or take wild guesses on the facts as well. That's very welcome. We are not on those platforms, though, so please don't try to have sidebar conversations or comments with us because we just won't see them. This is an actual thing that happens. So that's why I feel the need to say it. But as your comments come in, usually we get great participation on this. So by all means, we will read out your comments. when there's a lull in the conversation. In the interest of privacy, we're not going to name you and not get you in trouble because you probably should be working. Okay, now that we've covered our bases, let us get to it. So first question that I always just start with on this panel, so aimed at both of you, really just dive in, is what are you seeing in the market? This up and down crazy market. Both of you do a lot of outreach and whatever cold outreach. What are you hearing? What are you seeing? How does it feel out there?
I'm going to say I've been on the phones a lot lately, and this has not changed really since COVID for me, like in my perception, but people are fearful and distrusting. There is so much being thrown at them from every angle that they just don't have time, they don't have capacity, they don't have trust, and they don't have attention. And I think that breaking that barrier is the only way to continue to move forward with business, right? Like we've got to get back to very human interactions that offer value and connection so that we can actually start talking about business, because there is no right time or wrong time for business. There is strategic plays that you either have that vision or you don't, and you understand that value or you don't. And those, to find out if someone understands that, you've got to have a real conversation. So I would say that fear, that distrust that I get almost every time I call someone initially, that's what I have to fight through. And the way to do that is just being seen very differently, disrupting conversations. I think I'd probably say this and it's so annoying, but I'm like, you have to allow someone not to respond in a script to you. That is the only way to continue a meaningful conversation, whatever that is. Sometimes it's just, it's me like sending them a little trash can in the mail with our marketing collateral. Sometimes it's
I love that.
just asking, oh my gosh, I know I talked to you last week. How is your daughter's swim competition? Because they told me that, right? Like it's just disrupting that initial, I don't have time for this right now. Oh, thank you for calling, but this isn't. If you can do that, I think you've unlocked the magic. And so many people aren't equipping themselves to disrupt that script. They're using the script. And I think that's kind of cool that so many people are boring like that, because then that gives us the better opportunity to be seen differently. But that's what I see. A lot of fear, a lot of distrust.
Yeah. Christina, how are you feeling about things out there?
I think that is a good way to kind of phrase it across not only the candidates that I work with, but also the clients that I work with. From a client perspective, right, we've had an obvious change in power from last fall. And so that, I think, naturally just causes people to say, what's going to happen these next 4 years? And so the opportunistic hires that I felt like that my clients were making when I first started this job almost 4 years ago was a little bit better, because we had this infrastructure bill, particularly in my space, that had passed in 21. So people were very opportunistic about making hires and kind of bringing in the people before the work kind of came, that they were more trusting that would come. Now that some things are a little bit different, I'm not saying it's for better or for worse, there is still that kind of distrust of, well, we're just not sure, like, is a recession going to happen? Where the project's going to come from? So seeing a shift in the market from my space in looking at more maybe smaller projects or less federally funded projects. So I would say that's kind of the biggest change I'm seeing there. And that's happening not only in California, but in Texas as well.
Right.
So that's just to tie it back to obviously the Texas part.
Yeah. Thank you.
But then generally speaking, with the clients that I work with, or I'm sorry, the candidates that I work with, when I get them on the phone, it is kind of this distrust of, who are you? Why do you matter? What value can you bring to this conversation through your connections that are somehow going to supersede the ones I've already have and have had established in this space when I've been doing, this industry for at least 20 years, sometimes 30 years longer than you. Yeah. So it is kind of breaking through that. One, I'm just a person reaching out to another person, trying to make a connection there and network at the end of the day, not necessarily have to get you into another job. But also showing that you are in the space, I'm in the space. There's definitely value to be had from a conversation, whether, yes, it could lead to another job, or it could just lead to, I don't know, referrals or leads or, just industry knowledge. And that's something that I've been working towards a lot, I think, now going into my 4th year in this industry, is actually trying to separate myself from the noise that I think is causing a lot of that distrust.
Yeah.
Because there are so many robocalls and spam calls and just people who don't know what the heck they're doing. So they just waste a lot of people's time. And so you have to position yourself as an SME, a subject matter expert. That is, I think, something that people are appreciating more these days, because when I can name drop, hey, I worked with so-and-so, or I met so-and-so at this event, the conversation really takes a huge shift. And oh my gosh, she's real. She exists in this world. She knows people that I know. It makes it a lot easier. And the only way to do that is to actually get out there and put yourself in front of these people. That I know it's not the easiest thing to do. And it's not, something that I ever found myself when I, have a middle school math education degree doing when I was, confined to a classroom. But now I'm here. I'm out in the wild, if you will, going to all these events. I'm going to be going to California next month for a big, organizational couple of networking events that I just hear about through my network. And I just say, hey, work, I want to go. And they say, let's do it. And then I go and make these connections. And it's just so much more impactful at the end of the day, because no one else is really doing that, like taking that extra step to meet these people where they are, like literally where they are.
That's very interesting. You both raise interesting points, right? And both of the message seems to be about getting outside of your comfort zone, shaking things up, reminding the person that you're interacting with, hey, I'm a person, networking, face-to-face, going out and see, you know what I mean? Do you guys both, I get the impression that for a long while now, people in sales, outreach, recruitment, IT sales, which I'm also decently familiar with, people have been like getting more and more into a comfort zone, right? There's like layers between you and the other person, email sequencing, really hiding behind like company brand materials and so on, talking on a script, or even if you're not on a script, just like 7 emails instead of a cold call that are in a sequence app. You're kind of like hiding. You're not really showing who you are. You're not putting yourself down the line. So it feels better because there's less chance of rejection. But is that era over? It's because both of you are, the message seems to be like, no, be yourself, put yourself out there, like meet people, talk to people as who you are.
I think if you don't want to see unexpected results, keep doing those things. Like if you want to see that 1% success rate, or whatever that fraction of a percent is, open rate, go ahead and keep doing those things. But I think also it's an interesting that technology has made us so much more uneasy with any communication that's unexpected.
Yeah.
And so I find myself as a salesperson who I answer sales calls sometimes just because I want to hear like what they're doing. And then I'm like, that's sad, man. You could have done better. And I will give them this kind of feedback because I'm like, I don't think anybody's training you. Sounds like no one's spending time nurturing your skills. And so I will see a text message and I get very unsure if it's a scam or if it's something that's trying to data mine me or get information that could compromise my personal finances or my personal identity, like all of those things. So I think that's where it serves you really well to come in on untraditional channels. Mm-hmm. And Christina said that in a great way, which is you show up to events and you have this, trust of, I was at this event yesterday that's local, like there's some familiarity. Yeah. That's definitely not the expected conversation to have, especially when someone may be remote. And so I think, how can you come in through unexpected channels in a way that skips that technology distrust? I think that's an interesting skill to have. And then, I always thought it was funny back in my MSP days, like when I sold IT, I would send a postcard to people like in the mail, and it had this cute little design of like a USB cable. And it was like so great to connect with you. Right. It was just cringy and silly, but people just loved it because they would expect that all the communication and follow-up would come through email, video, or whatever, like technical channels. And then I would just send them something in the mail. And they would be so surprised. And I will never forget my customer in Houston, Texas, oil man, old school. He refused to talk to me. Refused. He told me, go F myself. And I was like, fine. I know you know a lot of people. We need to become friends. Like, this is the only solution to this problem. So I sent him that in the mail. And he said, you know what? Tell you what, come to Houston, have a beer with me. I'll talk to you. And I was like, fine. I come to Houston. 2 weeks later, I'm at this brewery, and he pulls this postcard out of his back pocket, and he's like, I got this for you in the mail. And I was like, wow, just the powerfulness of that engagement, but also being willing to kind of change my comfort a little bit and go out there and just be, okay, if that's what you need, that's fine. But I think changing channels of communication in a creative, interesting way is so much more successful. You can put out a lot more effort and get a lot better quality return. And it seems to just be focused on volume. Make 1,000 dials this week. You're going to be fine. Like, no, you're not. Your mental health is not going to be fine. You're going to feel completely useless because your connection rate is so insignificant and you don't actually get closer to your goal. So I think that's the biggest takeaway for me.
I think I would also add that I know the roles that I source from sometimes very entry level all the way up to, C-suite level. So that also means there's some generational differences and preferences on how we communicate. I've been to several different, speaking panels and, listen to what they had to say. And a lot of it does revolve around like retention and how do we attract talent a lot of times, which I also go to given my, position. And a lot of times they do bring up the fact that based on a generational preference, maybe people want to prefer or are more comfortable with text over email, over voicemails and calls. And I was trying to kind of pull that out even on my LinkedIn page a couple weeks ago, where I read some article where they said that, only a very, very small percentage of people actually listen to their voicemails and they prefer them to be under 15 seconds. And I was like, oh my God, no one's listening to my voicemails. And so I pulled and was trying to kind of look through that data, which only got like 50-ish votes, which, it's a decent sample size. But, I could see the kind of trend of people who were maybe a little bit more experienced kind of lean towards, I'll always listen to a voicemail over 15 seconds because it might be important. Whereas some people, I think, who'd either had less time or less experience and less patience, they were just like, no, I just don't have time for voicemails, period. So I do think that it's meeting people again where they're at.
Yeah.
In terms of their preferences. It's also why, like, when we, decide that we're going to have a calling hour, let's say at work, we try to base that around people's lunch hours, around people's commuting into work or out of work times. And which luckily works out decently well for me being in Texas, catering to a different time zone.
Right.
So I'm also not a big morning person. So I don't want to call somebody at 6:30 a.m. my time. But, some people, that's when they want me to call them. And I can do that with the time zone that we have. But so that's why I think it's important that it's not that we're moving towards a less personal world and human connection. I think it's just there's going to be different generational differences that we need to cater to and different schedules as well.
Yep, for sure. I totally agree. I think those are both really great points. And I think, Jess, you touched on something too, and so did you, Christina, as well. The just doing more of the thing that isn't working. Like, I think that is part of why it's gotten so hard and why people don't trust, is that internally, not just one hiring manager is saying, okay, well, we're only getting 1% return. I guess that means you're going to have to work 10 times as hard. So you're burning out your staff. But then that means that every hiring manager is telling all their sales reps to do that. So the poor public or the people who work at whatever industry are getting 10 times the number of calls from everybody or 10 times the number of emails, and to try to get that 1% return to hit some sort of imaginary target. That's why I get annoyed when people still use the term it's a numbers game. And it's like, okay, it is, but what numbers are you talking about? Are you talking about just really annoying people to death until you get the money? Because that's not cool. It's like not
I
sustainable.
feel like that's just bullying. Like, to me, I feel like when you just harass someone viciously for no reason except to get the thing you want, that's kind of just being a bully. Like, I feel like it's just had such a toxic effect on the people that we're calling on. I think I mentioned this a couple weeks ago when you and I were talking, Rick, but like, I called 100 small businesses that spend a lot of money networking, spend a lot of money on their organic pipeline. I called them from a local number, my cell, and I didn't leave a voicemail. No one called me back. I had less than a 10% success rate, and I was calling as a customer, right? And that's the damage. Those are the repercussions of our really non-creative, really cringy practices that now businesses that we're trying to sell into, we're trying to ask to hire a high caliber employee, don't have the financial funds because they are saying goodbye to pipeline by not answering their phone.
Yeah.
So it has this like very weird cycle of destruction in its path. And that's interesting to observe, but it's also really sad to see as a small business owner. But as just a person, like, I want to do business with small businesses. They're not even doing the work consistently if they're not answering the phone, if they're not serving clients, like, because they're like, well, I don't answer my phone because it's usually just robocallers. I'm like,
yeah,
but it's not always. So
definitely not.
Do you have a plan? Do you have a procedure for that? And most people don't.
Yeah. And that's tough, right? Because every time I finally do get somebody on the phone, and usually it's a very nice, warm conversation because they realize I actually know what I'm talking about, and I didn't just randomly call them from a list. Like, it was a very targeted approach.
Right.
They'll always say, well, you're like the 10th person to call me this week or this day. Even my husband, he's a tax accountant. I mean, he had a recruiter calling him at least 3 times, the same recruiter calling 3 times a week. And he's like, is that normal? Is that what you do? And I was like, no.
I promise, I'm not that bad.
Is that, you can't like get into that territory where, like you said, you're either becoming a bully or a stalker, but none of it's good. So that's why I think a lot of times, if I am going to reach out to someone multiple times in a week, it has to be not after one thing. It has to be, oh, I just heard about this, or, oh, I'm going to this networking event. Like, it's not me attacking, like, you need to talk to me, you need to give me this, because that's not why I call people. It's to get something, always what I want. It's to network, to connect, and then see if something that they need I can help them with. Like, that's the purpose that I try to go in with.
Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I love that. I was doing a brainstorming session with some clients, and I said, anytime you engage with a customer, you should say, what do I need from them? What can I do to serve them? And what do they actually need from me? Like, you should be figuring out those things during every engagement, because then it doesn't look like you're thirsty, right? Like, you have purpose. It's not just to get the things that you need today. It's to really serve better. And being curious it's such a huge piece of that.
Yep. I think it's a misnomer that people say that behaving that way is more long game, and if your sale is more transactional, then you need to behave in the other way. I don't think so. I think that, like, personally, I feel like it's a snowball effect, right? Like, if you network properly and people actually like you, and you can say, oh yeah, you know what, this isn't a good job for you, but let's keep in touch. And the person, you build trust, then you actually have a network. So maybe not in month 1 or year 1, but in year 2 or 5 or 6 or whatever, you have an increasing number of people that you can just pick up the phone and they're like, hey, how's it going? Yeah, totally, I'm interested in that, because you know them well and whatever. So it becomes easy to be quote unquote transactional because of all the hard work you've done genuinely building a network. You know what I mean? That's my two cents. But I mean, the thing is, that doesn't happen when you behave that way. If you just call people and ask, and you harass them like people calling your husband 3 times a week, Christina, and just bugging him, he's not gonna want to talk to them in the future when maybe they have a good job for him. So how is that helping? That doesn't even count as transactional. That's like the opposite of sales. It's like propelling people. It's not sales at all.
Yeah, I love that point because you're right. I actually just read an article from like a sales influencer who was like, if a salesperson puts that they're a community builder or relationship builder in their resume, I immediately dismiss them. And I was like, wow, look at you going. You're an awesome person. I can tell you're probably epically awesome at being a leader.
Yeah.
Like immediately red flag. But also it was really sad because I think a lot of us, we have this training that we've just received that's like, here's the thing, you have to send the sequence of 7 emails. There are these rules of engagement. And I think the rules of engagement are changing, but the idea in our head, in our body, how we're trained, is that those rules of engagement are still real.
Yep.
And they're just not. And being curious and questioning that is part of seeing the bigger picture. And I think Christina really spoke well to that. Like, you have to kind of you have to figure out how you can serve people that you're working with too. Because I think Rick is such a huge example of like building relationship with someone. And that's why we're friends today. And I'm going to say it every time, because the first email that Rick ever sent to me was like this Matrix thing. And his copy was so hilarious. And I was like, who is this guy? And I didn't even care what job he was really talking about or what. Nothing about that was important. It was like, who is this person? I feel like I need to know them on a personal level. And that was really what built that relationship. And now here we are years later doing these podcasts together, just building community. And I love that. And that's what the future is about, is building that intentionally, but organically. It's not about making that one transaction. It doesn't serve you.
It's true. And thanks for the plug, Jess. Checks in the mail. All right.
Okay.
Shall we explore a couple of my wonderful trivia Texas facts and see what they're all
Waiting. Yes. Here we go.
These might be crazy obvious to you guys, but to me, these were fun.
I feel like you're asking us to be a fact checker here. So
I know. I'm a little nervous, honestly.
From the internet, so they're probably 100% correct, right?
Yeah, of course.
So this is the first thing, is that I always forget that the Texas state motto is friendship. That's a thing I always forget, because I always think of don't mess with Texas or Lone Star State. You know what I mean? Yeah. So I had to look for, where does don't mess with Texas come from? Do you guys know where it comes from?
Trash cans, the DMV, I think. Yeah, back in the 80s when everybody's chunking all their trash out their trucks in the country, it's definitely a problem.
Yeah, and don't mess with Texas was the slogan for a state-funded anti-littering campaign in the 80s. Yeah. That was the slogan. And I guess being in my 40s myself, that's where I probably picked it up when I was a kid, and it was fun and funny. Probably something David Letterman said or something like that on TV, and then forever. Here's a fun historical one. Texas has been ruled by, it's a bit of a trick question though, if you ask me, but Texas has been ruled by 6 different nations in its history. And I was like, 6 sounds like a very high number to me. A bit of a trick question though. Do you guys have any guesses on which nations we're talking about?
I'm not a big history buff, and I want to put that out there.
Same.
But I would guess Mexico.
Mexico, definitely.
Totally, right? That was my only guess. That was my one and only guess.
I said yes. I'm pretty sure I knew that one, but I was like, if I act confident, I'm going to totally say something wrong.
Yeah, no, for sure. Mexico. Any other?
Spain? Spain?
Yeah, Spain.
Okay, yeah.
It was quasi surprising, then I'm like, okay, all right, I get that.
Yeah.
That's another guess I had.
What's that?
Spain was another guess I had, and then England.
No, not England.
Okay.
Weird, because of the U.S. Obviously, I guess at no
they
point.
Didn't make it that far.
We weren't around at that time. That's Texas wasn't established, so you can't rule what doesn't exist, I guess.
Well, so one of them, of course, is the United States currently, right? So that's one of the 6.
Oh, yeah, forgot about those guys.
So yeah, but then here's 2 that I thought were a bit of a trick question, because it's through all history. One is the Confederate States, because obviously at some point that was ruling Texas. One of them is the Republic of Texas, for the brief period that Texas was a country.
Yeah, that's true.
And this
I'm going to be so embarrassed that I don't know these answers. Our listeners better not know all these answers, because we're really shameful.
It's the internet. Who watches things on the internet?
Yeah, who needs to know these things when you have AI, right? But this one surprised me. France owned Texas.
Yeah.
Ruled Texas at some point.
Because Texas, Louisiana, of course, yeah.
There
Okay.
you go. Makes more sense.
There you go. Makes more sense. All the Cajun influence down here. We forget, like, living in Central Texas. I was up in Illinois recently, and like Dallas is very different culturally than Austin is.
Mhm.
And then like San Antonio is incredibly culturally different. And I was talking to a friend and she's like, it's like you live in a different country. Like, could you live in a different state? And I was like, honestly, I couldn't really, because I have so many different cultures and experiences within a 5-hour drive of me that's all in the state of Texas, that it's just so interesting. But funny story, I live in Austin. I've lived in Central Texas my whole life, and we have piñatas every birthday. You have a piñata. Okay, this is the thing. You go to a park in the spring, there's piñatas in the park. People are doing it. Okay, it's a big deal. We're in Chicago, and we're driving through some of these warehouse districts, and there's like these like cantina kind of like Mexican restaurants and all of this. And I was like, oh, there's a piñata store. It's cool. And we're driving around. We find out it's a prospect's birthday. And we're like, oh, we should go get him a birthday present. I was like, let's get the guy a piñata. And they're like, Jessica, we can't. You can't do that here. And I was like, what? What?
You can't buy a non-Latinx person a piñata.
I guess you can't. And I was like, in Texas, it's definitely different because that's just the culture. Like my son, he went to my sister-in-law's mom's house. He calls her abuela. Like, it's just part of it. And he's a little ginger baby and definitely not actually related to her. But it's just, I think it's lovely. So I think we're lucky. Texas is really interesting from that roots, that it is so diverse and interesting in one not so little state. But there's just so much here from the different cultures and people that live here that I love it. I'm glad to live here. And I love having a freaking piñata. So obviously I can't leave.
Have you ever seen those little baby piñatas? Someone made a business out of that they send to people in the mail.
They're like tiny ones?
Yeah. I forget what it's called, like party piñata or something. Shameless plug for them.
That's so awesome. Okay, love that. Love all those things. Some of these are a bit business related because obviously, but so staffing and recruiting, I was just curious, like, what are we talking about? What's the industry in staffing and recruiting in Texas? Estimated at annually $16.6 billion USD just in staffing and recruiting sales. Second largest in the US. And this goes back to, Christina, what you and I are talking about with what you do, is California is number one. Now, this is funny because especially lately, and we were talking about this just before we went live, those who are listening, we, in staffing and recruiting, there have been a lot of people who are like, it's hard to hire in California. It's expensive. It's difficult. Let's not go there. Right. And no, we all don't ride horses. Someone just commented. Something we were discussing. Yes. For anyone who thinks the Texans ride horses, see, I have two guests on. Neither of them are riding horses right now. Not a thing.
My horses are in the stable out back.
Oh, that's so good.
Never
come on, Christina. Come on, Christina.
Never owned a horse.
I haven't either.
Grew up in a townhome in Houston. Never rode a horse.
All the townhome owners, they all have horses, right? Like, obviously.
Yeah, totally.
Just tearing through the townhomes. Bucking through the townhomes. But California's annual revenue in sales for staffing and recruiting is $41.4 billion.
Wow.
So like more than double Texas, which is number 2.
Right.
Crazy.
So I mean, somebody is doing business in California, obviously.
They are.
California's doing business in California.
You are. Yeah. Exactly.
Oh my gosh.
So just thinking about that for a moment before I move on to other trivia questions, is that kind of a thing that you guys are aware of in general? Is that a big part of the relationship between California and Texas? Like, is there I know a lot of Californians have moved over based on just the news. You mentioned the wildfires, Christina, but in general, just for business reasons, tax reasons, a lot of people have moved to Austin, Dallas, Houston in the past few years, since COVID especially. But is the California market just a big money market? Like, is there a lot of Texas-based business that does business with California, and is that a huge market there, or is it? How do you guys feel about the relationship business-wise between the two?
I mean, what I'll say is we work with so many different clients at the international, national, regional, even local levels. So if we're looking at more of businesses that do California and Texas, I cover both of those markets in my space. I would say a lot of them, it seems like they opened up their offices East Coast, expanded, to the south to Texas, and then have been slowly expanding west. So it's interesting because I feel like the businesses that got into California first, obviously kind of created a monopoly of sorts where they are the ones that get, awarded the best contracts or projects, stuff like that. Um, and if they don't have an office already pre-established, a lot of these larger firms are actually doing a lot of mergers and acquisitions, specifically to get a foothold in the California market, because they do recognize that it is quite a bit of a gold mine. We've got the World Cup, LA Olympics, all these major events that everyone's going to be flocking to Southern California in particular for. So there is a high interest, especially come 2028, for businesses to get in on these big projects. So that's where I'm seeing some big moves there. And like I'd mentioned earlier before the broadcast, like we have a lot of positions that are practice builder level for firms that are either wanting to expand like a brand new office into California, maybe from a lesser populated area like Central Valley, and maybe want to get that Orange County office established. Or they're just, taking the other route of finding a smaller local firm that already has renowned reputation in the area, and can help them win that work and kind of merge with them for that means. So it's interesting. There's been a lot of those lately, more so than ever, I think, because of all these exciting projects that are coming up. And I think it's just going to continue to do that. And so the next few years will be kind of telling of, I guess, who the major players are probably going to be in the next few years, since smaller firms, if they're not, with them now, they may in the next few years. And that's not, again, right or wrong. It's just an interesting observation because it wasn't as prevalent, again, years ago, but now it's definitely picking up the pace.
Yeah, and I mean, everybody that I talk to, and when I say everybody that I talk to, I speak to companies and candidates in the UK regularly, across Canada, and in the northeast of the US, as well as California and Texas and so on, Charlotte and what have you. But everybody seems to be under the impression that the market is crazy, everything's up and down. Tons of stuff is risky. California is, forget about it, too expensive, too hard. This is what I keep hearing all the time from everybody. But everybody wants to talk about Texas. They want to have an office in Florida because I guess they just want to party all the time and pay no taxes. But then in reality, what they're like, oh, we'll settle for Texas is where we should go because that's where all the growth is. That just seems to be the hype globally, is that in the US or in North America, if you want to go somewhere where it's booming, where everybody else is tanking, it's Texas. And do you guys feel that on the ground, or do you think that's a little bit of just hype? Or
living in Austin is so interesting because I've lived in Austin for a long time, and again, like, it's very culturally different than Dallas. So Dallas is like big business, lots of oil, like the same kind of thing. Florida and Texas, it's like you live in Dallas, but you do dirty business in West Texas. You don't actually live out there. You just come. You go out there for stuff, and then you come back to your nice Dallas house because it's just gross in West Texas, right? Nobody wants to actually be there.
No shade, West Texans who are listening today.
I mean, that's just
gross.
like,
sorry, it's gross.
There's literally TV shows about it, y'all. Like it's a community belief. I'm just going to speak for the people, but I think like it's interesting in Austin because what I've seen is that we have a ton of like tech. We have a ton of big companies that maybe don't always have large footprints physically in Austin because it's much more remote. But these small businesses that have been like legacy businesses are disappearing quickly. And that to me is kind of an interesting thing. Like even Austin, walking around downtown, last weekend, which we don't do very often. The hotels are huge, corporate owned. Like there's just a lot more enterprise business in Austin than that was ever there before in the last 10 years. And that shifted the living costs here, which are still, cheap compared to everywhere else, but definitely getting more expensive. So it's having this interesting, like, negative consequence on some things, because I don't know about Dallas. I mean, it's a busy place, but Austin has grown so quickly that our infrastructure is not built for it at all.
Right.
So we have highways that are not built for even what the city looked like 10 years ago. And they are now supporting so many millions of people that have moved here. And so like our school systems aren't, and like there's just so much infrastructure that's driven by tax money, but also because Texas loves giving away stuff for business to come here. I feel like there's a bit of a catch up happening within the community. And so I think that's the biggest impact that I see day to day. I also see that, like my husband worked at Tesla here at the Gigafactory, and most of his coworkers had migrated from the California location when they opened up the Gigafactory, because they needed that talent here that already had the experience. And they were so happy to live here because one, even their California dollars bought them such a better quality of life here. But it was interesting to just see how their lives were impacted by that migration of business. In the entrepreneur space, one thing I've noticed is that I'll meet a lot of founders here in Austin that have a co-founder in California. So they are like co-founders across those two state lines. And that's something interesting too that I've seen in this community specifically. So they're covering all their bases.
Yeah, it's interesting. So it's not just high, like there is a lot of ways that California and Texas are sort of doing business kind of together, kind of against each other sometimes, like Tesla, for example, or whatever, flipping the bird to one state, going to another. Christina, do you feel like the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex is going through the same kind of growing pains, like infrastructurally, and like, or is that an Austin thing?
So the big project that everyone talks about in California is high-speed rail.
Right.
It's been a big topic for a long time. And luckily, I would say that California is a slightly better position to build upon that than Texas. Texas has also been talking about high-speed rail for a long time, creating that trifecta between Austin, Houston, and Dallas. It is still a very, very slow go. So it's tough because, we talk a lot about first to last mile in transportation engineering, right? And so like the first leg of your journey, what does that look like to the last leg of your journey? So if you were to ask me if I were to try to take a more active transportation approach, meaning I'm walking, biking, rollerblading, I don't know, but not putting emissions out into the world with my car or motorcycle or something, that would still cause me to have to drive 20 minutes out of the way in the wrong direction to Fort Worth to take the train to Dallas and leave my car in kind of not the nicest part of town. I'll just say that.
Okay.
Take, I don't know how long it is, maybe 15 minutes, 20 minutes on the train, and then have to maybe get an e-bike or walk like several miles to get to my Dallas office. So to answer your question, no, we're not really built really well from an infrastructure standpoint, because that's what we talk about all the time in my world, which is that first to last mile, and how unfortunately we are seeing so many businesses come to the DFW area, which is great. Like I love seeing all the cool, plans for bigger parks and some other spaces that they're really trying to modernize, but it's not going to be at probably the speed to catch up with all the influx of people that are moving here, especially from California as well. And the housing market is still very tough. So people's ability to buy houses are also constrained a little bit, except for the folks coming from, more expensive states like California, maybe New York, I don't know. So it's going to be really interesting next 20, 30 years. I read some article that my husband shared with me about how DFW is going to supersede any major city in the U.S. in terms of, I think, population in that time frame. out in LA, New York, all of it. So it is definitely coming to here, and it's going to be really intense. And I just don't know how we're going to be able to keep up with that. But that's why we're also trying to get the housing market right now. So then
Sure.
hopefully
While the getting's good.
Yeah, get it while it's good, because it is obviously on a lot of people's radars, not just California, but elsewhere too.
It's interesting that California and Texas both struggle with natural resources, because we're also going through a major drought right now, and lakes down here are drying up. They're the lowest that they've ever been, like historically, and so there's a whole bunch of complex problems that we will continue to have, because as more industry builds here, that's more square footage of land that's taken for buildings rather than water collection. So like the struggles just kind of continue, and I'm looking forward to seeing like how creative organizations start solving those problems, because we're definitely running into, I feel like kind of what LA ran into during the Hollywood era. Like they had to start creating these like major lakes and stuff to support the water needs. Yeah. We're kind of there. We're doing that right now in Texas too.
Yeah, it's interesting, right? Because it's like, the economy drives the growth decision of like, oh, we need all these people here to work all these jobs and industry and what have you. But the natural relief and geology and whatever of the actual land you're going to live on is not, it's just kind of like, whatever, we'll just retrofit it. Need more water? Cool. Fly it in from somewhere. Like that seems to be the plan. But is there like a tipping point where it's just kind of like, this is a colossally bad idea. Now all these people are, without water or whatever. It's risky.
It is risky. I mean, but in great risk comes great reward. So it's definitely a long game thing. And I think that's why enterprise businesses will be able to survive those challenges a lot better than smaller business, which as someone who really loves small business, that makes me a little sad. But small businesses are going to have to get a lot more creative in the way that they offer to support larger businesses that are sold at a value to those companies, because often small businesses do business with other small businesses. So the value proposition and the pricing doesn't make sense to an enterprise client. And so there's going to be a lot of relearning how to sell themselves and offer their services so that they can continue to stay relevant.
Touche. That's a really good point, actually. Let's hit a couple more of these crazy stats while we're at it. So biggest industries in Texas on paper: energy, agriculture, and IT is what the internet says. Does that felt anything missing there that you guys would say in terms of industries, verticals?
I mean, I feel like food is such a big deal. Like Dallas is interesting to me because a ton of franchise restaurants are based out of Dallas area. Like every franchise restaurant you've ever wanted to go to in your life is basically based out of the Dallas metro area, which is crazy to me. But I think it's interesting with manufacturing kind of coming back from vehicle manufacturing. Like Tesla is interesting that it's come to Texas, because that's definitely not something that we've ever really had here significantly. So oil and gas, I'm surprised it's not on the list.
Yeah.
Well, energy,
I mean, I guess it's energy. Yeah,
same
exactly.
thing. I guess that's
yeah,
mean, right?
Same thing. Okay.
Yeah, I guess I mean oil and gas predominantly, I would imagine these days.
I guess.
Yeah. Well, please.
I was just going to say, yeah, I agree. As long as oil and gas is grouped into that, then that's probably the biggest thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm assuming. One fun fact about Austin that I didn't realize is Whole Foods started in Austin. Picture Whole Foods being a very New York or LA thing, but it's Austin based.
Our very first date was at Whole Foods, walking around sampling little things. And my first consulting client, she launched her product at the flagship Whole Foods, which is on 6th Street. And she was 4 years old. She brought her lemonade, Me and the Bees lemonade. She brought her little wagon of lemonade to that Whole Foods market in glass little bottles. And that's how she launched her product. So yeah, Whole Foods used to really have a small town soul. Like it was a very different vibe. And it's definitely changed since Amazon's taken over. But I bet Whole Foods is a huge piece of downtown. It's really crazy to see it now. It's interesting.
Didn't Torchy's and Mellow Mushroom also start in Austin?
I've always thought mellow mushroom started in Dallas, but I don't know because we don't
No?
actually have very many of them anymore. They've all gone out of business.
Well, highly recommend those two chains, and I always synonymize them with Austin because they're a little bit funky.
Mellow mushroom is the ultimate stoner food and definitely checks out being in Austin. Interesting thing I learned yesterday, and I don't know if this is true. The very first 24/7 7-Eleven was on UT campus.
Really?
The very first one. And I was like, what? That's crazy because I just assume 7-Eleven's been 24/7 forever. It's in the name. Like 7-Eleven. I don't know.
But I guess originally it was open between 7 and 11.
Only 7-Eleven. So, yeah, that was super interesting because that also has like a core memory. My husband and I on our wedding night parked in that parking lot, and I was on his motorcycle in my wedding dress. This guy's like, bro, did you just get married? I'm like, yep. Yeah, I did. I don't think he was sober. He was definitely not sober. But
at a 24-hour 7-Eleven, the heck you say?
Yeah. You go there for the good stuff, not water.
Yeah, for sure. That's awesome. There's another thing about Austin that I love. First of all, it's the live music capital of the world, they always say, right?
Sure.
So as a musician, as an ex-record label owner, obviously know a lot about Austin from the music standpoint. So that was my entry. But I did not know that it's also the O. Henry Pun-Off World Championships of Puns that they host every single year for years and years and years now.
Yes.
I love me a good pun. So what the hell am I doing here? I should be in Austin competing.
Come down. Come down.
Yeah,
come down. I'll come watch you.
Yeah. My wife will be so angry, but like proud, but angry, but like proud.
You're like, I have this really important business stuff I've got to do.
I gotta go.
Be right back in a week.
Exactly. I'll see you in a week. I'm all over social media winning pun championships. Also, Austin, the city with the most books sold in the U.S. People buy books in Austin. That's cool. Dallas Fort Worth International Airport is bigger than the island of Manhattan. What? How is that a thing, Christina? You were saying it takes you so long to get to Dallas. Is it because you have to pass the airport?
Well,
an hour and a
I
half.
would like to say this. We're also one of the most efficient airports, like one of the largest, but also one of the most efficient, because when I go through DFW, which I will have to do next month when I travel for work, I'm always out of security within like 20 minutes or less.
Yeah.
Usually.
That's awesome.
Agreed.
Yeah.
And they
I've
don't
been
get
airports.
I've never lost my stuff flying into DFW.
No.
Those people got it down.
It's very, very organized. It's really cool. I didn't realize that a lot of airports weren't as efficient as that. Like MCO out of Florida was not the best. LAX,
famously, long, the crazy.
Denver, all of it. It's tough, but no, DFW Airport, very good. Highly recommend.
Totally.
And everything's better in Texas.
So this is the themes, right? So then you got Dallas Fort Worth Airport bigger than the island of Manhattan. That blew my mind. And then Statue of Liberty, the entire Statue of Liberty fits inside AT&T Stadium. That's how big AT&T Stadium is. You could have the Statue of Liberty in the middle of it, and it would fit.
Lots of concerts there.
Yeah. I mean, we have a lot of land. We get to do stuff in a really big way. Like, it's interesting. You travel through smaller towns. We also, I think, have one of the highest speed limit bases. Like, we drove to Tennessee and we were dying because we could only go 55 miles an hour. Here you get to go 75. Like, you're like, there are roads with 85. You're fine. Like, no big deal. If you're not driving 80 miles an hour everywhere you go, it's because there's traffic. And like, we were in the hills and the mountains. We're like, oh my God, it takes forever to get places here. Like the time. So it will take you a really long time to get anywhere here. Like, I live in Austin. I live on the very north side of Austin, like in Round Rock in the suburbs. Mm-hmm. And it takes me an hour and 15 minutes to get to the other side of Austin.
Yeah.
Sometimes maybe 2 hours, depending on traffic. Like, it really, and it's only 20 miles. Like, the time and the distance here is just totally a mystery. And then you want to drive to West Texas, it's 6 hours of driving and you're not even to the border of Texas yet. So yeah, it's weird. one of my clients was like, "Oh yeah, I'm on my way to drive to the beach at Florida," and I was like, "Wow, that's a super long drive." And he's like, "It's an hour and a half." I'm like, "Oh yeah, I forget. States are smaller."
Yep.
You guys live in smaller states. You can actually drive to another place in a day. I can't really do that here.
That's something I'm envious of Americans for, and Europeans too, right? Who I speak to for a living. So I always hear about how they're driving to other cities. It's just kind of like, it is a day trip for me to go visit my parents in Montreal. Or it's like you can fly, but I'll tell you one thing: it's not as efficient as it is in Dallas. It takes definitely more than 20 minutes in security. So either way, it's like a day trip to just go to the next nearest big city in Canada, and that's where I'm in the most densely populated parts of Canada. So like, just like the horse riding, we don't sleep in igloos, but it is an empty, vast expanse of nothing, Canada. There's a few dustings of people here and there. So I'm jealous of that. I'm jealous of that. Well, so those are kind of my stats. It sounds like everything's bigger in Dallas and everything's weirder in Austin. I love all of that. Any kind of closing ideas you guys would like to give to people who, even just being the sales panel as it is, and both of you are doing different kinds of outreach. We talked a lot even earlier about personal branding and having a personal touch. Maybe even thoughts on the future of where this is all going. Like, do you guys feel like everybody who's in an outreach capacity is going to have to basically find a way to brand themselves as a person into it and not just use the company brand? Or how do you guys feel about where this is all headed?
I do think that the way I recruited when I first started is vastly different from where I am now.
It is.
Some of that is due to confidence, resources, having more clients to now actually have reason to visit, things like that. But I do believe in kind of like, if you're not evolving, you will, unfortunately, from Darwinistic standpoint, just die off a little bit. Like you always are having to constantly evolve and change. And kind of like we said before, cater to the different needs of different generational or different schedules, that kind of thing. So I think it is about constantly reinventing yourself, which for some people that's very exciting, and for some people that's really taxing. And so I think the folks that are excited by that will stay in recruiting and staffing for a while, because it's always this constant, creative approach of how can I change, or how can I do more with less, or things like that. So I do think that the personal branding will come into play a lot. So it can help you continuously evolve and just improve your ability to recruit, especially folks that just have a different, or would appreciate really a different approach.
So from a sales perspective, I find it strange and interesting how people can be just representing the brand that they sell for, and that's their entire identity. And then when that job lets them go because they have this, unrealistic idea of quota, then they have to suddenly re-identify themselves within their new role. And that's exhausting. And the turnover is so much higher nowadays. Like, people are really being in jobs for such a smaller amount of time that you have to become the subject matter expert quickly and efficiently. So leveraging tools like AI, leveraging technology in smart ways so that you can spin up quickly in a role that you're in, but then keep your personal brand, because your personal brand, like Rick had said earlier, is about the community that you built, the trust and the rapport that you already did the work for. So how they're not there for the widget you're selling. They're there for the experience that you gave them.
Yeah.
So how do you, modify that experience to match the message of whatever product or thing you're selling, but keep yourself intact so that when that thing churns and that brand dissipates, you don't dissipate your identity with it. And I think that's where personal brand really is coming into play. Like, I have been really fascinated about people's followers and like how they're managing their book of business from their influence only. That's an interesting phenomenon. And I think that's going to continue, especially with the next generation being so tech savvy. And that's the way they build community, and that's the way that they communicate. So I think it's going to become even more critical to be able to keep yourself elevated from whatever task you're currently in.
Those are great points. I thank you both for both of those points. And I think it's really true in a market like today. Like, people who are looking now. And if I ask the question, like, do you have a book of business? Like, what's your network like? How can we leverage your existing network to whatever? There are a lot of people look at me blankly and they're just kind of like, yeah, I mean, I have a non-compete. And I'm like, right. But I'm not saying steal the client. I'm saying, like, do you have a network of people you could sell something else to? Or, and a lot of people are like, no, if I move, I'm starting from total scratch. And I'm like, okay, that's not a good idea. Like, you should be setting yourself up to not start from total scratch. Like, it should be on your mind. And for anyone who's listening, I think you both gave some really great examples of, right, how to network and to nurture a network and to sort of build yourself a career and brand yourself personally so that you're not constantly starting from total scratch. Don't do that, everybody. Just don't.
Yeah, don't start over. It's so hard to start over anyway now. And especially, you know, the older that we all get, like, it's just harder. So being able to spin up quickly and using technology to make yourself really familiar and confident, I think is going to become people's superpower as time changes.
And leveraging their existing network too. So I think a lot of times people think building a network means cold calling or having to meet people at events, which sometimes it is.
Yep.
Yeah.
But once you do have an established, even if it's small network, like we always talk about, okay, like if you're calling someone that you know doesn't want to move jobs, like what else can you talk to them about to bring them value, but also bring you increased value in your daily whatever KPIs you're trying to do, but also just like for your network purposes. So I think asking for referrals, asking about what events they're going to, even if it's virtual events, sometimes I attend those since I can't always just be there. Like that's really important as well. Just getting involved in organizations or again trying to figure out what their interests are. I heard about a new organization today that in the 4 years that I've been doing this job, never heard of, and got invited to like a golf tournament. Like,
cool.
You just never know, but that's why you keep networking. And this was someone that I've known for a couple years, you know? So it is really cool to know that you don't have to always start from scratch, but once you do get a few people, like actually keep talking to them. Don't just say, we met once, never see you again. Like, that's not how you build relationships. You can build relationships, but then the question is, can you maintain them?
Yeah. Oh, that's the struggle right there. That's what's going to get you every time. Like that bandwidth is a challenge. And if anybody solves that problem 100%, I want to know, because I've been trying to build some automations myself. I'm like, if I don't respond to a text message within 24 hours, remind me to do it. Like those kind of things I'm starting to build for myself because we are so busy. We're the busiest we've ever been.
Yeah.
It's true. Great advice. Maintaining the relationships. You know, it's like if you leave your job and you go somewhere else, are the people you spoke to before going to answer your call? Or if you leave that job, are they never going to answer your call again? It's a good indicator of whether or not you maintain that relationship. If you never talk to them again, like you say, Christina, they're probably not going to pick up the call if you're working for another company that they don't deal with.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah.
Pure and simple. Well, thank you both so much. Lots of insightful things for people to chew on. Very grateful to have both of you here. We're on every Wednesday at noon EST. Please join us all. And if you did not get to watch this live, shame on you. No, I'm kidding. Just while you can actually get it anywhere you get your podcasts, Spotify, Apple Music, anywhere you like. If you find a place that has podcasts that this is not on, do let me know because it should be. Thanks a lot, all. See you next week.
Thanks.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks.